In a move that astonished even the Queen's old aides, Princess Anne has reportedly slammed the gates of the monarchy shut on her own nephew. Just moments after a damning financial audit revealed, Anne acted with merciless precision, unleashing a royal inferno. But what precisely did the audit expose? And why would the most obedient member of the family turn into its strongest defender? Before we get deeper into what this truly means for the royal family, please sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. The leak landed like a thunderclap within the palace. The calm hallways became tense. After ringing once, phones stopped ringing. Within hours, rumors circulated that Prince Harry had made a private request intended to open doors that had previously been thought to be closed. Not a plea to the public, not a sentimental olive branch, a formal request to resume major royal responsibilities presented as readiness, accountability, and reconciliation. What Harry did not expect was the quickness of the response. Princess Anne did not delay. She did not defer. She did not seek consensus. She moved with the kind of authority that comes with decades of service and a reputation for lacking emotion. Her rejection was quick and apparent, delivered with a finality that insiders describe as ceremonial. This was not a personal rejection. It was a message. The timing raised alarms. Exactly 1 minute after a sealed financial audit reached the inner circle, Anne's decision was locked in. No debate, no revision. 1 minute. That detail alone sent shockwaves through royal watchers and palace officials alike because nothing in the monarchy moves that swiftly unless something major is at stake. Whispers followed soon, not of petty conflicts or hurt egos, but of numbers that did not add up. Accounts connected to charitable organizations, payments channeled through unfamiliar routes, previous agreements quietly re-examined. Financial entanglements have the potential to tarnish multiple names if they are revealed. The audit was never meant to surface. And yet, here it was, influencing a choice that would alter everything. According to insiders, Harry's response was visceral, betrayed and caught off guard, boiling. This was not the answer of a man negotiating terms. This was the response of someone who assumed the door was already open, only to hear it slam shut, with a force he did not see coming. Years of distance, public confessions, and carefully built narratives suddenly felt irrelevant. And then there was the quiet. William didn't reassure me. No softening words from Camilla. No attempt was made in public to recast the situation. No message could compare to the impact of their absence. To some it suggested coordination, to others complicity. A cohesive front built not via announcements, but through restraint. The message was unmistakable. This decision was allowed to remain. Anne's role, however, cut deeper. Known as the monarchy's most strict enforcer of duty, she has long been the quiet custodian of its norms. When others bend, she does not. When others hesitate, she acts. Her move showed that this was not about forgiveness or family reconciliation. This was about protection. Of the institution, of precedent, of anything freshly endangered. As the palace sank into a brittle quiet, one truth became unavoidable. This was not the conclusion of the story. It was the beginning of an unraveling. Because beneath Anne's unyielding position lies a paper trail, one that begins with the audit no one was meant to see. Buried deep in royal ledgers and offshore accounts was a fact that might ruin more than reputations. It could shred the fundamental idea of a modern monarchy. The audit, intended for internal eyes only, made its way to a perilous area of the firm and uncovered links that now threatened to bring it all down. What began as a routine evaluation quickly turned into something far darker. Behind the velvet ropes of history and protocol, a web of financial problems surfaced, notably regarding the Sussex, linked foundations that previously promised kindness, transparency, and global outreach. But beyond the slick mission declarations, auditors found silence in the wrong places, gaps where there should have been traces, and rapid transfers that made no legal or ethical sense. It wasn't just a financial red flag, it was an alarm screaming in every direction. The cash didn't vanish, they shifted, traced through obscure corporations registered in tax havens. Assets were discovered channeled through shell companies with ties to advisory firms, speaking bureaus, and charitable subsidiaries. The deeper the inquiry went, the closer it drew to the Duke of Sussex's post-royal ventures. A disturbing overlap arose between private talks, priced in six figures, and funding transactions that went back to accounts originally associated to the royal foundation. This wasn't simply blurred lines. It was explosive. Then came the clause. Buried in the fine text of the Sandringham Summit, a phrase overlooked by most, but binding to all. It said that any post-exit financial dealings by former working royals must be declared for 6 years if tied to earlier royal projects. That provision, dusty and long neglected, was reactivated when inconsistencies arose. The company, ever attentive, now had legal grounds to investigate, and with Anne's complete power and silent permission, they conducted an investigation. What no one expected was Anne's concealed hand behind the curtain. The Princess Royal, famed for her stoicism and duty-first mindset, had long served on a confidential financial oversight subcommittee. And while the world regarded her as the public face of tradition, behind closed doors, she had become a defender of honesty. Her involvement in the audit was never publicized, never discussed. It was hidden in secrecy agreements, kept behind royal protocols, until now. Insiders allege the probe has been discreetly proceeding for over a year long before Harry even hinted about returning. According to one source, he was never meant to know they were monitoring. That was the whole objective. Observe without intervention. What the audit revealed may never be fully disclosed, but its impact, unmistakable. It wasn't just about the money. It went right to the heart of royal survival and was about trust, concealment, and perceived betrayal. Anne's rejection of Harry wasn't reactive. It was strategic. She had seen the numbers. She had read the files. She realized what was at risk. The gate wasn't shut to defend the past. It was closed to preserve what remained of a fragile monarchy under siege from within. And now, with the truth creeping toward daylight, the decision to lock the door might just be the start of something far more personal. But the audit's revelations didn't only expose figures, it reawakened a rivalry that's been quietly festering for decades. This wasn't just policy, this was personal. Anne's rejection wasn't developed in a boardroom. It was forged in the terrible silence of royal corridors, where tradition meets rebellion and duty battles with disobedience. Their relationship, once amicable, had deteriorated long before the world knew it. For years, Anne bore a hidden burden of great bitterness rooted in the rules of succession that kept her sidelined, despite being the Queen's only daughter and one of the most faithful workhorses of the monarchy. She never complained, never crumbled. But the wound was real. Her sense of duty was sharply sharpened by witnessing her younger brother's rise while she worked in the background. That edge would later turn toward Harry. Anne saw Harry's departure as a betrayal rather than as a contemporary decision, a public surrender disguised as liberation. When he and Meghan stepped back and saw not heroism, but cowardice, she saw their proclamations of independence as a show rather than a sign of power. Her loathing for the Hollywood royals, as she apparently called them, only intensified with every media appearance, every private interview, every red carpet cause masquerading as action. She did not witness two revolutionaries, she saw deserters. A leaked letter from 2021, never meant for public eyes, captured the heart of Anne's rage. She allegedly scribbled, "You don't walk away from duty," in it. It's engulfing you. Those 8 words weren't philosophical, they were a battle cry. Service wasn't seasonal for Anne, it was generational. And Harry, in her eyes, had broken that sacred chain. However, the tension was not one-sided. Harry had grown increasingly unhappy with Anne's influence over Charles, and most recently, William. Every time he wanted to re-engage with the royal machine, it was Anne who surfaced as the silent obstacle. She didn't shout, didn't posture, she simply advised. And her advice was heeded. Behind palace walls, Harry reportedly referred to her as the gatekeeper, a moniker that is both frightening and mocking. When Anne made a choice that shocked even close aides, that resentment erupted into an emotional outburst. She declined to go to Archie's christening. The reason, according to insiders, wasn't scheduling. It was protest. A refusal to embrace what she viewed as selective royalism, seeking the privileges, escaping the duties. More than any other occasion, that one caused personal breach instead of just frigid distance. And the warnings were always there. Employees now reveal that Anne once remarked, "He'll burn it all for attention," during a heated meeting with Charles. In hindsight, chilling, and for some, prophetic. Early on, she noticed something in Harry. Yes, a desire for independence. But he was also prepared to burn the crown if he thought it had abandoned him. Anne's decision to restrict his return wasn't formed from protocol. It was born from years of seeing a family member grow distant, then disruptive, and last, dangerous. It wasn't just about numbers or duty. It was about survival of a system Anne had protected her entire life. But Anne's frigid rage wasn't the only impediment in Harry's path, because the money trail had a ghost, and its name was Diana. Long after her death, Diana continues to foment turmoil within palace walls. Now a private memo suggests that her hidden trust may have been mishandled, and that Harry's name is dangerously enmeshed in its financial shadow. Could the people's princess have unintentionally sponsored a royal rebellion? What was once a heritage of love and protection has now become a source of cold scrutiny. Diana's own trust fund, properly constructed after her death, was always meant to protect the futures of her two sons. Equal portions, equal care. That was the intent. But when the examination deepened and financial documents spanning over 2 decades were re-examined, something surprising occurred. Withdrawals that didn't fit with the original structure, disbursements routed through nameless middlemen, and a series of early access requests that bore Harry's signature. Or so the files claim. The whispers were immediate. Had Harry dug into Diana's confidence prematurely? And if so, for what purpose? The $4.5 million disparity reported by the auditors wasn't disregarded as a clerical error. It was indicated in red, the kind of red that raises concerns about intent, influence, and legality. To exacerbate the situation, some of the assets in question were allegedly indirectly connected to the Sussexes' post-royal independent endeavors, which included media projects, corporate engagements, and private investments in California. The implications were seismic, and Meghan's legal team wasn't idle. According to insiders, they drafted a formal threat to disclose what they dubbed inheritance prejudice, the belief that Harry had been obliged to act outside protocol because of unequal access compared to William. That line alone put royal advisors into frenzy, because the public reaction would be disastrous if it were discovered that the palace had disregarded Diana's dying wishes. But Anne wasn't swayed by the logic. She allegedly referred to it as sentiment manipulation and insisted that Diana, had she lived, would have rejected any action that converted her memory into financial leverage. Anne's posture was icy but unwavering. She observed a line being crossed not by necessity but by intent. In her eyes, the sacred had been weaponized. Diana's affection has been repackaged as justification for financial autonomy. Harry, however, held solid in his defense. He reportedly told a confidant that everything he did was to protect her legacy, not exploit it. He believed that honoring her soul meant establishing a different route, one free from the very institution that caused her such anguish. In his perspective, the money wasn't about power. It was about freedom. It was about not repeating history. However, sentiment and spreadsheets now clashed violently inside the palace. Diana's trust fund was no longer only a financial problem. It had become the emotional battleground where heritage, treachery, and distrust clashed head-on. And though she is no longer here to talk, her presence haunts every decision, her silence louder than ever. Yet amid the echoes of Diana's name, another figure was also preparing to move, because as Diana's ghost approached, the genuine orchestrator of Harry's demise emerged from the shadows. It wasn't Charles either. Before her death, the late queen left behind a secret order designed to lead the kingdom through its darkest hour. But now that paper has reappeared, and its contents might wreck Harry's final chance at redemption. Did Elizabeth anticipate the commotion and purposefully leave him out? The presence of this instruction was never meant for public knowledge. It was held in a secret vault, away from reporters, politicians, and even certain family members. A single paper, handwritten and sealed, addressed not to any individual, but to the crown, a final effort to preserve order when passion may impair judgment. And now, owing to a leak from within the palace archives, its contents are bursting over every headline and royal circle. At the core of this tempest is what insiders are dubbing the Loyalty Memo, a collection of guiding principles left by Queen Elizabeth II, written with full understanding that her demise would leave a broken family, warring factions, and raw wounds. In it, one clause has sparked an internal earthquake. Clause 3, no reinstatement without full familial consensus. On paper, it sounds like a formality, but behind closed doors, it is a weapon. And everyone knows exactly whom it targets. The message does not mention Harry. It doesn't have to. Every royal assistant, every advisor, every member of the inner circle knew its significance the instant they read it. The monarch, ever calm in public, had stayed mute during much of the Sussex turbulence. But her notebooks, now largely accessible to the family through her post-mortem command, paint a different picture. Within them, she apparently expressed sentiments of grief, even betrayal. Her dreams that Harry would find his way back without torching the institution she spent her life to faded as she watched interview after interview redefine the royal image in the darkest light. The choice to grant Anne custody over the directive was no coincidence. It was trust that Anne would implement her will without hesitation, without yielding to emotion or controversy. And Anne, in true fashion, did just that. She used the letter not as justification, but as judgment. Not only was her rejection of Harry's return economical and emotional, but it was also constitutional. Elizabeth's last voice weighed heavily on it. William, not Anne, was responsible for one of the most painful events. According to a palace source, he read the note in private and sobbed. Not from relief, not from rage, but from the awful load of what it entailed. The underlying fact that to respect his grandmother's desires, he had to withhold grace from his brother. That commitment to the crown meant quiet, even when the heart crushed under the weight of it. And so the document, once sealed in secrecy, became the last nail in the coffin of reconciliation. Harry, they indicate, learnt of its contents only after Anne's official refusal. To him, it wasn't simply isolation, it was treachery from beyond the grave. He had been written out of the future he wanted to recover by the same woman who had previously dubbed him her cheerful one. Yet even the Queen's words could not contain what followed next. Because Harry refused to give up, he was ready for battle. Harry's private messages, which were encrypted, enraged, and calculated, have finally surfaced, exposing a prince on the verge of collapse. He is now threatening legal action, media firestorms, and the discovery of royal secrets that no one has ever dared to touch rather than begging for re-entry. A scorched earth strategy has emerged from what started out as a desperate attempt at reintegration. In a startling event, a series of encrypted communications were anonymously disclosed to investigative reporters, exposing Harry's private discussions with a London-based crisis PR agency. The text is explosive, not simply in tone, but in intention. No more diplomacy, no more waiting, no more quiet dignity. This was war by digital ink, and Harry had selected his battlefield. Among the stolen letters, one struck out above all, a project entitled Royal Audit Retaliation, a strategy, clearly defined, to publicly fight the results of the audit, not through legal back channels, but through a high-profile media onslaught. The plan included documentary specials, exclusive interviews, and the threat of a data leak to independent watchdogs. It wasn't simply damage control, it was deliberate payback. And behind that technique, Meghan's fingerprints were clear. The communications mentioned secret terminology like amber stage and window 3 exposure, which sources now verify were included in an internal communications manual used by Sussex to conceal PR strategies. Meghan's direct involvement was modest but evident. She gave advice on timing, media outlets, and tone. She wasn't leading from the front. She was taking the lead from the shadows, precisely directing the story. However, it didn't end there. Buried in the texts were barely disguised threats to accuse top royals in financial mismanagement, persons unknown, but easily inferred based on the context. One email reads, "If they want to drag Diana's legacy via spreadsheets, then we open the rest." Another closes with, "I don't think they want that ledger reviewed." The consequences were terrible for the company since Harry wasn't kidding. And if that wasn't enough, a final blow followed in the shape of an unexpected offer. Harry, via his legal counsel, indicated he would be prepared to testify under oath. If trust fund issues came under public examination, it was a step no one anticipated. A senior royal proposing to appear in open court. For the monarchy, it was the unfathomable. For Harry, it was leverage. The palace, however, did not flinch. Princess Anne replied to the media frenzy with a single statement that was discreetly sent through official channels in a rare moment of ruthless clarity. Let him try. No ornamentation, no more explanation, just icy, unyielding defiance from the lady who had already locked the gate and now stood watch at its tallest tower. Storms are nothing new to Windsor. But this wasn't scandal, it was siege. And as battle lines were set in emails and headlines, what no one saw coming was already moving behind the scenes. Because while Harry launched his counterstrike, Weinerstreit, another revelation was poised to surface. One not about what he accomplished, but about who genuinely gained from the upheaval. But as the palace prepares for legal warfare, one unexpected surprise sends shockwaves down every hallway of Windsor. When the dust cleared from the audit, one name stood out. Not Harry, not Meghan, but someone considerably more threatening to the crown's image. The report's last page exposed a royal insider who was surreptitiously embezzling money, and the revelation alone would split the family in two. The paperwork was thorough. Every transfer monitored, every shell company traced, and in a final twist, what looked to be an unconnected revenue stream, concealed by layers of legal redirection, was indisputably traced to a series of anonymous offshore accounts. Over the course of several years, these accounts had been discreetly and reliably transferring large quantities of money. When detectives followed the thread, they discovered an unexpected person, not a rebel, not an exile, but a functioning royal, esteemed, senior, untouched until now. The name, when disclosed, caused vibrations through the castle. This was someone long considered as untouchable, a visage of calm amid disaster. But the audit told a different tale. Behind the scenes, This monarch had been discreetly prospering themselves. Properties were acquired under aliases, payments diverted, and bribes disguised as philanthropic presents. It was not sloppy, it was sophisticated, intentional, and damning. And then came the hush. After being so outspoken in her rejection of Harry, Anne found herself at a loss for words. No statements, no clarifications for someone who had publicly taken a viewpoint. Her silence now provoked more questions than it answered. Was she defending one of the most vulnerable members of the monarchy, or the monarchy as a whole? What made this even more disturbing was what occurred next. Sources close to Harry claimed that he has known this identity, this fact, for at least 2 years. He had found enough clues and pieces to realize that something wasn't quite right, but he never disclosed it. Not in his interviews, not in his memoir, not even in the Netflix special. Why? One source said he was preserving it, a last card. He wished he would never have to play it. But now, with the door locked and reputations armed against him, the card had been flipped over, and it was nuclear. To contain the aftermath, the palace instituted an instant and comprehensive media blackout. Warning notifications were sent to royal reporters, stories were buried, editors were leaned on, social media accounts highlighted. It was a full-scale containment attempt, but it came too late. The leak has already spread, and whispers were becoming roars. The public was no longer simply questioning Harry, they were questioning everyone. And in the court of public opinion, silence is guilt. The family now stood broken, not only by bloodlines, but by truth. A straightforward rejection had turned into a full-fledged confrontation. Lines were being drawn, allegiances challenged, and secrets exposed. One of their own had crossed the boundary not for freedom, but for riches. And the institution they had promised to defend was suffering as a result. As public pressure increases and media swarm about like vultures, Harry is ready to deliver one last message to the populace. They made an effort to keep him quiet. They prevented his return. But now, Prince Harry breaks his silence in a pre-recorded global broadcast, one that promises to disrupt the foundations of the firm and redefine what it means to be royal in exile. It was more than a message. It was a reckoning. Streamed over many platforms, translated into several languages and viewed by millions, Harry's broadcast was quiet in delivery, but volcanic in meaning. Gone was the filtered diplomacy. Raw truth was all that was left, sharpened by anguish and polished by resolve. He began not with fury, but with grief, a delicate tone, a penetrating glance, and a confession that sent shockwaves through every royal hall. I did not squander my mother's heritage. However, some did. He spoke of the audit not as a goal, but as a witness. He disputed every claim connected to Diana's trust, but then flipped the narrative upside down by accusing the institution itself of fundamental corruption, not isolated blunders, not personal greed. He described it as a system intended to suppress the inconvenient and shield the strong. He asserted that proof of financial corruption was concealed by titles and customs inside royal channels. Accountability, he added, should not stop at the gates of Buckingham Palace. And finally, the boldest demand of all, an independent audit of all royal funds, public, transparent, immediate. He challenged the company to reveal its financial records, to show the world the truth, not the version produced by courtiers and advisors. The task was not only symbolic, it was political. If adopted, it would demolish centuries of concealment. If ignored, it would merely confirm what many had long believed. For a time, the broadcast seemed to be his alone. But then Meghan showed up. She said nothing. She didn't need to. Her countenance, pale, shaken, resolute, told volumes. She stood beside him. Not as a companion in revolt, but as someone who had experienced the penalty of it. Her presence made the moment heavier. This wasn't just about royal politics anymore. This was about survival, about identity, about two humans who refused to be obliterated. And then came the emotional fissure that shattered hearts throughout the globe. Harry's voice faltered only once when he addressed his brother. "William," he added, "you were my brother before you were their heir." I still remember that. It was not an accusation. It was an appeal, a memory of a connection that once transcended contracts and crowns. But as he talked, the quiet from Kensington was deafening. The people, already split, exploded. Some welcomed him as a truth-teller, finally exposing a rotting core, buried under polished gold. Some accused him of betraying an institution too sacred for show, revealing secrets and destroying bridges. Whatever their position, there was no denying that the company had been compelled to react. The monarchy, battered by crisis after scandal, suddenly stood surrounded. And although Harry's message rattled its pillars, what followed would assault the foundation itself. However, Princess Anne takes one last, unexpected move as the monarchy recoils from the broadcast. As a last act of royal will, Princess Anne grants Harry a never-before-used power that permanently prevents him from returning, not merely from obligations, but from title, inheritance, and legacy. The royal lock clause has been triggered. The House of Windsor conveys a message to the globe with it. As the public reeled from Harry's broadcast and the firm struggled to minimize the repercussions, Princess Anne appeared once more, not with a statement, but with a strike. She cited an obscure royal charter phrase that was hidden so deep in constitutional parchment that even top advisors were surprised it was still enforceable behind closed doors, in a secret council. It has never been utilized, never even acknowledged in recent times. Until now. Its purpose? To permanently remove a royal's official status if they are thought to pose a persistent threat to the crown's survival. And in a terrible moment of commitment, Anne performed it. The outcome was instantaneous and irreversible. Harry's Roach status frozen, not revoked temporarily, not suspended, locked in stasis, in perpetuity. He could not retrieve it, reapply for it, or inherit anything tied to it. Legal consultants, including those seasoned in questions of succession and peerage law, were allegedly stunned. Some believed it was excessive, others declared it inevitable. But none could dispute the message was definitive. The emotional impact reverberated across the broader royal family. Eugenie and Beatrice, who had kept strong links to Harry despite the distance, were saddened. According to sources, Eugenie attempted to step in, even proposing to have a private conversation with Anne. But she was denied. The choice had been made. The provision had been signed. And no personal plea would undo what had now become royal order. Camilla, whose position had been quietly tenuous during the building tempest, voiced a subtle but unambiguous validation of Anne's behavior. The next day she made a private presentation and mentioned the value of clarity when things are unclear. It was an indication that someone else had taken on the task of shutting the last door, as well as a gesture of alignment, approval, and possibly even silent thankfulness. Then came the palace's concluding remarks, cold, measured. Lastly, the matter is closed. That was the sum of the formal statement made by Buckingham Palace. No more explanation, no emotion, no apologies, just closure, delivered with surgical accuracy. But the people was not so readily pacified. Protests occurred outside major royal homes. Online, hashtags erupted asking for change, transparency, even collapse of the monarchy. Some praised Anne as the necessary enforcer for the crown, while others thought the choice was cruel, even medieval. The argument generated a tempest that reached Parliament, where rumors of royal oversight began to gather support for the first time in decades. Even while the House of Windsor moved quickly, it revealed more than it concealed. Because Harry wasn't the only one involved. It was about a system, a family, a heritage wavering between preservation and collapse. But if history has shown us anything, it's this: no gate, no audit, no royal order can halt the truth once it's been set free. Thanks for viewing. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in the next one.